in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, hello, hello. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. Okay, let's get one thing out of the way. As you come in, please click that like button, click the subscribe button if you're not already, and click the notification button. Because today we're going to be talking about a very, very important topic. Okay, we have a great video to review today, and it's all about time management. Okay, now, how can you manage time when you're not in charge of time? Is a good question. Time in that serenity prayer will be in that category of things that you cannot control, but perhaps you're going to need. Well, first of all, you need the wisdom to recognize that you cannot control time. You're not in charge of time. You don't control the 24 hours in a day or the flows of time. Whether you're sleeping or awake or in a coma or whatever you may be doing, time has its own program. So in what sense are you in charge of time, right? But people always talk about time management. Hence, we're going to break down the fact that really what you're looking for is productivity, right? You're looking for ways to optimize. You're looking for ways to prioritize, be effective, be efficient. And that's what we're going to be putting down on the table today. Now, let us go ahead and bring in Dr. Thunder. How are you doing there, sir?
What's happening, man? How you doing?
Not bad at all. Hopefully the sound is coming in loud enough and clear enough.
Yeah, no, it's good. It sounds good, man. You're
excellent,
good.
Excellent. So, yeah, I was talking about this time thing here. You see, there are two ways in which we manage things, right? One way is when you're in charge of it, right? I am in charge of the store. I'm managing the store. I'm managing this crew of workers, whatever it may be. The other way is when you survive something. Like I managed to get through last year, right? I managed to get the degree. I managed to, right? So you're not in control. You're not the boss of that thing, but you're contending with it. And I think that time is more in this category as opposed to the other where you are the boss of it. I don't know. Any thoughts on that before we get going here?
Yeah,
time management.
Yeah, something that you said in your sort of monologue, in your introductory remarks, reminded me of something that my dad said to me, and said to me several times. And that is just this idea that you can't actually manage time, right? Because as the saying goes, time waits for no man. And that corresponds with what you were talking about related to the serenity prayer. This is one of the things that you can't control, right? The best possibility is to be able to control the events, right? Mm-hmm. To try to create enough structure and organization to manage events, because time cannot be managed. My dad always would tell me that a better label for time management is actually event control. Mm-hmm. So And it was interesting because I remember one of the last times he told me that. And I talk to my dad all the time. He's always giving me gems. But one of the last times we talked about that particular topic, the event control, was when he handed me a planner. And he seemed to understand what my next steps needed to be. It's one of the great benefits of having your dad. Having your dad around. It really is.
So you understood where you were, and what you need next, what the next hurdle will be, what the next peak is, and stuff. Okay.
Absolutely. I still have the alarm clock my dad got me when I was in 8th grade. Right. So that was one of those next steps. Like, okay, now we've been waking you up and making sure you're awake. Now this is your responsibility now. So he seemed to have that figured out.
Event management sounds a lot like prioritization, right? You got to have a priority in order to. That's a big part of this. And as the thumbnail says, effectiveness and efficiency equaling for productivity is what we're gonna get. Is what is my attempt to summarize the 10 things. We might not get through all 10 today. We might get through 5. I don't know. And then we'll continue next week. We're going to be reviewing in this video. But as you know, I like to do, Dr. Thunder. I like to take lists and reduce them, right? So I think it all comes down to prioritization, which is about effectiveness and efficiency, getting down to productivity. So let's say we talk about that event control thing, for example, which is the prioritization thing. One aspect is the prioritization. So if you need to, so there's a question of, do I need to dig a hole? That's like, is it a hole a priority right now, right? Should I be digging the hole? So that's the what side of things. And when, what and when, like, should I be doing this thing now? Is it a priority? Should I be digging a hole? And then you're going to get to the how. Okay, so if I decide I should dig a hole, then should it be dug with a spoon, with a backhoe, or with a boring machine? And then gets you to whom, because that how is related to the skill, right? The how and the who, right? Because some people decide that, hey, there should be a hole dug. So I have a spoon, right? So let me just start digging. And then, but this is a hole that needs to be dug with a backhoe machine. And maybe you need to find somebody with the skills to dig that hole. You should not start digging it right now just because you feel like you have a spoon. You're going to start digging the tunnel. Okay, it's like, no, chill. You need to dig the tunnel. That's fine. But you're not the right person to do it. Okay, that gets into that whole effectiveness thing and efficiency thing as well. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we're going to start reviewing this video. I haven't got a chance to watch it, but I have my man here who claims to have read all the books, okay, about time management. And he's going to give us 10 tips. And we're going to be, as we do over here, kind of looking at them one by one, seeing how they fit into this, we control versus no control of time, into the prioritization, into effectiveness, efficiency, productivity, and all that good stuff. Let's go ahead, give it a go.
All right, so over the past 10 years, I have read basically all of the books around productivity and time management. And in that time, there are 10 things that I still use in my life, genuinely use to help make my time management more efficient. Let's talk about them in this video. Tip number 1 is that we absolutely own all of our time. Now, this is like a big one. When I first had this realization, my life genuinely changed because I used to think I don't have time to do stuff. And I don't know where I read it, but I came across this probably like a fortune cookie somewhere, which said something like, at any given moment, you are doing what you most want to be doing. And that was a very empowering thing for me because I was obviously in need of empowerment. And it helped me realize that my time is entirely within my control. Like right now, I'm filming this video because I want to be. Earlier today, I spent 6 hours playing World of Warcraft because that's what I wanted to do. I could not have said I don't have the time to work out today. Instead, it was a case of I'm actively choosing not to make the time to work out today. And so when it comes to time management, step 1 is always to recognize that we are always in control of our own time. Yes, you might have a boss. Yes, you might have parents telling you what to do, but fundamentally, you are in control of your own time and you can choose to do whatever you want with that time. If you don't have the time to do something, that something is just not a priority, which is fine, but don't pretend like the reason you're not doing it is because you genuinely don't have the time. Point number 2 is
All right. What do you
Can I
think
jump
about
in?
that one so far? It almost sounds like your whole event management thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it does. Of course, he's using. It can be sort of confusing. It can almost seem that he's contradicting what it is that I was saying, but he's not at all. He's actually he's just using a different sort of meaning of the word time, and possibly a different meaning of the word control, because he's just talking about prioritizing, and even when you think of the term like make time, making time, or your time is your own, any of those kind of expressions, that's not really he's not talking about the ability to manipulate the flow of time, make it faster, make it slower, make it serve you. That's not what he means. He means, essentially everyone has, a certain amount of time, and you get to choose what you do with that time. It's more of that kind of thing. And let's see here. He said something at the end. Can you rewind a little bit?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and rewind just a tad.
Yeah.
Choose whatever you want to do. Yes, you might have parents and stuff. Talking about you.
Warcraft, because that's what I wanted to do. I could not have said I don't have time to work out.
So this reminds me of the idea that he's presenting is similar to the idea that I present when I'm talking about budget. So if you work for, somebody else, then invariably you're going to hear the word budget, right? And especially if the organization is big enough, that word budget seems to have some sort of magical power, right? Like they think they can just say the word budget, and then it's going to fool everyone into thinking that they weren't the ones that set the budget, right?
Exactly.
In a budget, all a budget does is it expresses your priorities. That's what a budget does. So when someone says to you on your job, well, that's just not in the budget, an idea that you present or a raise that you ask for, what they have just told you is that you are lesser important than the things that they have put on the list above you. That's what they have told you. They have said, we think that we can get away with not paying you more because we don't really think it's much of a risk. We think that your value is, we like you working here, but we don't think that it's enough of a risk for you to go somewhere else for us to pay you more. So it's not in the budget, right? There's other things that are more important. And so when he says that, so when he was talking about this sort of time prioritization, so he chose to play Warcraft instead of going to the gym, right? So he could use the verbiage, I didn't have time to go to the gym. That would be kind of like using the budget.
The gym was not in the budget, sorry.
That's right. There it is. There it is.
The gym was not in the budget. World of Warcraft is, though. So he's going to have to deal with it. 100%. Okay, let us continue.
Today. Instead, it was a case of I'm actively choosing not to make the time to work out today. And so when it comes to time management, like step one is always to recognize that we are always in control of our own time. Yes, you might have a boss. Yes, you might have parents telling you what to do, but fundamentally, you are in control of your own time and you can choose to do whatever you want with that time. If you don't have the time to do something, that something is just not a priority, which is fine, but don't pretend like the reason you're not doing it is because you genuinely don't have the time.
I want to just mention one thing real quick here, which is for me, the way the time question tends to come up is when it crosses the axis of tiredness, energy, right?
That's right.
That's the one. Because, hey, man, I got there is time right in front of you right now. Okay, and I'm looking at this task that I gotta do, but I can't.
Yeah.
Can't seem to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the more
Now,
tired you get, the more time it's going to take, because you're fumbling around and making a lot of mistakes and stuff that you have to rework.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I immediately prioritized to a nap, right?
Right.
And it sounds trivial, but some other, you might, it is obvious. In other words, it sounds obvious. Like, okay, you're tired, go nap. But a lot of times people don't do that, right? A lot of times people, or us, we rather than nap, will take a screen and put it in front of our face, right? And scroll,
Right.
and which is not resting us, not at all, right? You're getting your eyes involved and your brain involved. You're getting more and more tired. It's not going to give you the energy to go back and work on this thing. So I'm like, okay, cool. We're gonna have to prioritize this nap now, right? And then when I lay my head down, and there's a way to kind of, for me anyways, I kind of know like, oh, this nap is worth it or not, is when you lay your head down and then you just kind of feel that rush of jumbled thoughts, like almost like you're dreaming. You know what I mean? Like almost like there's this thought association that happens when you flow from waking to dreaming, right? Where you're thinking a word and then the word becomes a color and the color goes off into some dream, for example, right? So there is that state of mind that you're in. It's not a very clear way to think when that association thing is happening in your head. And just a tangential thing here, when I lay my head down or when I try to go to sleep and my mind is doing that, I'm like, this is good. I shouldn't be working on anything right now, because there's no way that what I'm going to be doing is going to be efficient. If my mind is like doing this thing right now, then I should just let it rest. And then when I rest, I come back and like, boom, resting was the priority apparently that needed to happen there. But energy will come into play as we go on, because obviously it's associated with efficiency, right? Pretty much energy in and output out, right? The work that you get out is the whole measurement of efficiency. There's no 100% efficient, but if you're finding yourself in a place where you're like, okay, I got the time, but I really just can't do it right now, take a nap. That's all I'm saying. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time. I think that the whole time waits for no man, stop wasting time. Time is the most valuable thing that you have. I think we've, in general, although people still waste time and, they're still lazy and everything else, and not taking full advantage and not engaging each moment, not being fully present, not milking every conversation, every interaction as an opportunity to learn, right? So we know that people don't really take advantage of it, but we know that marketing has happened. That's something that everybody hears. But the thing that it seems to me that we don't talk about nearly as much, which may actually be more important than the amount of time that you have, is your energy, right? So often could be the case that you have plenty of time, but you have no energy. And it doesn't matter how, how much stuff you have to do and how much time you've put there. If you're not adequately rested, if you have spent all of your bandwidth, or whatever on other matters, you're just not going to be any good. And that whole, going through the motions thing, that's a nice thing to say, but we know that the reason that sandpaper is effective, and what makes it even more effective, is pressure. If I take sandpaper and I kind of lackadaisically just wipe it across the table, okay, it's going to scratch the table up a little bit, but it's not going to do much. If I really start to grind in and use a lot of energy and intensity, right, then that's when that sandpaper is really effective. And that's pretty much, it's a metaphor for, anything meaningful that you're going to try to engage. Intensity, energy, You know, that's what actually produces results, not just sitting around with a bunch of time.
100%. And you mentioned got to be well rested. Okay. You got to be hydrated. Okay.
Yep.
You got to have, you can't be 300 pounds unless you're like 6'7" or something. Right.
Right.
Or you're building, you know, that kind of a thing. So for me, let me just kind of say this real quick and then we'll continue. For me, where these conversations happen of such things such as time management is at least 3 levels above the fundamentals. The first fundamental for me is the body, right? It's like,
right.
And the way I analogize it is, you know, you have a car, right? There's got to be the brake fluid and the steering fluid and the lubrication, the engine oil, the water, or the radiator coolant, the coolant, right, in the car, and all these other kinds of things, right? That's got to be checked. It's got to be up. It's got to be up to snuff, okay? Before you get into some other things. So, you know, maybe start checking the electrical systems and you know, maybe something is misfiring, maybe there's a fuse that's out, blah, blah, blah. And then there are a couple levels above that before you get to what I call, you know, now you got to strap a rocket engine to the back of the car. Because if you strap a rocket engine in the back of a car that has no oil, you can see where you're leading yourself down, right? So a lot of times people ignore, okay, the fact that they have not taken care of the body aspect, but they're talking about these strategies, these systems, okay, these tactics. Tactics is very high up for me in terms of the checklist, whereby low is fundamental, low is the basic, okay, and then you start going up. That's my direction here, okay? So the body, first and foremost, meaning hydration, exercise, sleep, all that stuff. And then you go into the mind, okay? I'm not gonna bore you with that stuff. But then after that, you go into tactics such as, well, do I need to switch locations, switch tasks, prioritize, do this, all this, the other kinds of things. So that's the realm that we're in now. But few levels below and more fundamental and basic and required for this energy thing that you're talking about is the body, 100%. And that tends not to be focused on. And I think people don't focus on it because you have to do something about it rather than just talk, right? Because it's easy to talk about strategy, right? Easy to talk about management. But when it comes to hydration and sleep and exercise, it ain't no talking. You just got to do it. Anyways, let us continue. Right now, I believe he's going to get into prioritization. We just hell yeah or no. Let's go.
Point number 2 is the title of this book by Derek Sivers, Hell Yeah or No, What's Worth Doing? Now, the vibe here, hell yeah or no, it kind of says it all in the title. When we're young and we don't have very many opportunities in our lives, we should probably say yes to the majority of things that are coming our way. But as soon as we get to a point where we're starting to get more inbound leads than we have time available, we start operating with a hell yeah or no maxim. And the idea there is something is either a hell yes or it's a no. And so if I get an email from someone saying, hey, do you want to do this thing? And I'm thinking, maybe it sounds kind of all right, then my default position is going to be no. If I get an email from someone saying, hey, do you want to do this thing? And I'm like, hell yeah, then I'm going to do the thing. And I'm trying to get better at using this principle in my life because even now, my calendar is full of a lot of things where I'm like, yeah, kind of, rather than hell yeah too. And I always regret doing it when it comes down. So hell yeah or no, just like learning to be okay with saying no to stuff is another really important principle of time management. Thirdly.
All right. We're back at prioritization, as I suspected that was going to be about, the hell yeah or no. And a couple of things that he mentioned there. Number one being, he said that when you start getting higher and higher, or more and more skilled, more and more established in whatever you're doing, right? You're going to start getting more and more opportunities thrown your way. He said inbound leads, let's say, sounding very sales-like, right? Now people are coming to you. People are saying, hey, check this out. Check out this opportunity, right? And at this point, prioritization becomes even more important. And he's using an internal kind of barometer that says, if my spirit, my body, and everything says, hell yeah to an opportunity, then I go for it. And it's presumed that your entire internal barometer is not all out of whack, right? Let's assume that. After all, you have kind of established yourself a little bit more, right? You are higher up there. So you do have a better intuition, instinct, and good sense. So using that hell yeah or no, so you don't crowd your calendar with all these things. Like, for example, I was talking about that hole, for example. If the hole should be dug with a spade as opposed to with a boring machine, then anybody with a spade can do it. So maybe you shouldn't be doing it, right? So you've said that a hole is needed. So a hole is needed. We need to dig the hole right here, right? And I found out that the hole needs to be dug with a shovel. It's a shovel type hole. Then I shouldn't just go and pick up a shovel and start digging right now. There should be better things for me to do. I should go, because anybody can do it, right? But anyways, what are your thoughts on his hell yeah or no with regards to this internal heuristic, or shall we say internal barometer that you have to choose, and how you don't crowd your calendar with superfluous, unnecessary things that maybe other people should be doing?
Yeah. So one of the things is that you have to recognize when and or if you're actually at the level to be able to say no to anything. I think that's the first step. Okay. Because, and shout out to Kevin Samuels. One thing that he talked about was, if you're broke and you're not working at least 60 hours a week, you need another job, right? And and the point of that is that when you don't have anything, your time is not worth much, right? And so whatever you can do to exchange it for the highest value thing that you can get, that's what you have to do. But once you start to climb up this sort of, and I've talked about this on our show before, once you start to climb up this sort of pyramid, what starts to happen is you get closer and closer to being able to say no to more stuff, right? So that opens up because you're more specializing and less generalizing. So that is a process, though. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time for you to get to the point where you can actually start saying no. Okay. Now, once you get to that place, then you can start to be more sort of judicious and maybe well measured, and only engage in things that are exciting to you. But you have to understand that I would argue that most people don't get there. Only a 100%. Small percentage. Yeah. Only a small percentage are going to get there. So if you're in a position now where, well, hey, Ike and Dr. Thunder, they're trying to tell me to learn how to say no to stuff. No, I'm not. No, we're not. Because if you broke, if you still haven't hit the super chat because you broke, no.
You still haven't hit the super chat. That's a good one. But what you just said about notice when I said if you shouldn't be digging the hole, I didn't say don't dig hole. I said go give somebody else.
Right. Yeah, and that's right. So in other words, okay, you're still responsible for getting it done, but maybe it's not your hands that are doing it.
Yes, that is my belief. That's more of maybe it's an entrepreneurial mindset, maybe it's a business mindset, but you never stop saying yes to opportunities, right? The point is you're going to build a system, an institution, a group of employees, whatever it is behind you that you delegate stuff to, that you say, okay, cool. This is a hole that needs to be dug, and it can be dug with spades. Anybody can do it. Hey, spade guys, start digging, right? That is where the no comes in for me. The no is, no, I shouldn't be doing it, but I typically will find somebody to do it for me, right? I'm not just going to drop an opportunity all the way flat. Typically, I allow this to happen. In other words, if opportunities fall off, I allow it to fall off kind of, I would say, organically as a result of just me not being able to catch that particular ball while I'm juggling, right? And it's like, I just can't do that. That one slipped by, right? But typically, I actively don't say no, right? Completely. I'm saying no to me doing it, and I'm gonna find a way for somebody else to do it. And if I don't have a way for somebody else to do it right now, I still say yes, because I'm going to use this particular yes as a test case, as a way of building the knowledge base, the system, the employee, the whatever, to do such things, right? And that now I've expanded. Now I have this extra thing that I can do. But 100% what you said is true. You know, most people will not get to the position where they can just be saying no to things. And even if you thought you got to that position, maybe you need to think, if you want to be someone who builds business institution type stuff like that, then you need to say yes, but then outsource it to somebody else.
Yep. So then it's like the money is still passing through you. The opportunity is still passing through you, and that will be useful as time goes on. It's also
it's an asset,
an organic way to develop networks.
Yeah, people forget about pipeline control, right? Because I talk about tanks and pipelines as two different kinds of ways of dealing with water, right? You can have a tank of water, or you can have this pipeline where you can just tap into it and get some water out from time to time. What we're saying now, where you route it to somebody else, is the pipeline way of doing things, right? And typically in the pipeline way of doing things, you still get some profit, right? You're going to hand it over to this person and you get, or let's say you get no profit. Let's say it's a 100%, you take this opportunity and you pass it on to your associate over there, and they're the one getting all the money. But you're the one in control of the pipeline. And people forget that the pipeline control is an actual asset, okay? Because you can decide where to turn that pipeline towards, okay? You're an integral part of that thing happening. Because a lot of times, in business, you take money from a client and then you go apply it somewhere to get work done, right? And the client doesn't care how much of that money you keep or don't keep, but you're the one in control of that flow. You want to be in control of, you want to be the one taking his money, regardless of whether you keep the money or you pass it along. The fact that you have the attractive power, you're the magnet to pull that money out, pull that value out, if you will, right? And you have that network is 100, it's an actual asset. It's called a business, okay? You can go and take a loan against it. Even if you're not keeping any money, you can take a loan against that pipeline. You can say, hey, I have this magnet that draws out $50,000 a month from people, right? And that's valuable, okay? So that's why you got to find a way to take every trickle of value that's coming in and find a way to route it, even if you're not the one that's doing it. Hence, you build a system, an institution, an organization, whatever, to route it. And that's what it's an asset. You can list it down there and you can, do tax write-offs and all this kind of good stuff. But the daily highlight, what do you think this one's about? Sounds like more prioritization.
Yeah.
But let's see.
There's a tip I picked up from this book called Make Time by Jake Knapp and John Zaratsky. And this tip is called the daily highlight. This is like deviously simple. Basically, the idea is that every day we decide this one thing is going to be my highlight of the day. This is the only thing I need to get done today. And on the days where I set a daily highlight, and I try and do this every day, I always get the thing done, and I'm always really happy at the end of the day. But if I have a day where I don't set my daily highlight, then I kind of drown in my to-do list, and I have this just image in my head of like, oh yeah, I need to do this and this and this and that. And it's a lot harder to get stuff done. Whereas on days where I have the daily highlight, I have that just one thing that I'm focusing on. This is the most urgent or the most satisfying or the most fun thing I have to do today. And then it just really, really helps with my time management. Tip number 4 for time management.
So the daily highlight assumes that you already have a to-do list. Okay, I'm assuming. Correct me if you have a different understanding of it. But you already have a list. But in that list, there's the main thing that you're like, okay, today, this has to be done. This is top priority today, right? And I got to do that thing. And now I can remember certain days where I had that, where, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, what are the two things that must be out today, must be sent out, must be shipped, must be done? And typically it's a good way to kind of organize your day, right? And it's more of it helps you with, I don't know, what are your thoughts as far as this one goes? Because one could go a couple of ways. One could just go mechanical and be like, it doesn't matter. I put everything on the list and then I knock it out. I don't need no highlights. The highlight is there, but I don't need to know that it's a highlight. It's in the list and it's going to get done. What are your thoughts?
Highlights are for wussies.
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. So there's different ways I suppose you could think about this. In matter of speaking, you could think of it like you just have it's like you're just revising your priorities daily, you know, and so you're able to focus on something. Now, okay, so here's potentially the issue. Again, this assumes that you have the type of lifestyle where you can just do one thing and that be your satisfaction for the day. You might not be in a lifestyle where that's possible. So say if I have I don't know, well, I do have about 5 jobs. So I guess maybe that's a little, well, I have 5 jobs, right? So I could say, okay, well, the most important thing is, like I transcribed some music last night and today that had to be ready for this rehearsal that I just came from. Church rehearsal, right? So I could have said today, the only thing that I need to have happen today is I just need to get this music done. It's like, well, okay, that's cool. But I also have a show with Ike, and that, that's a, highlight, manner of speaking. And there's other things that were going on. My wife asked me to do some stuff today, pick up her medication at the drugstore. I picked up, I did, she asked me to, to locate a chair. My son had a baseball game today. Unfortunately, I couldn't go. He's got another one on Thursday. I'll be at that one. So, it's like there's competing interests. There's it's not just one thing. I mean, if you have the kind of lifestyle where you can just be sitting around, I'm independently wealthy. If I don't even touch anything, my investments are going to, they're going to pay my bills. As a matter of fact, I don't even have to pay the bills. I pay an accountant to pay my bills. So today I'm going to, that chair over in the corner that's been bothering me, it's not exactly turned exactly the right direction. So that's going to be my highlight for the day. Let me turn that, make sure it's perfect. Okay, I feel good for the day. Okay, now obviously I'm being, a little bit silly with this. But the point is that in order for you to be able to focus only on one thing, that says something about your lifestyle, and maybe that doesn't really relate to most people. Maybe most people need to have a few things or several things, that they have to get done. I'm constantly reminding.
Somewhere else on this list, okay? I suspect somewhere else on this list is going to be something that balances this previous point about highlights. Because there's something that we know about time, which is that if you say, today, what I need to do is transcribe the music, it's going to take all day to transcribe the music, right? But now we're talking statistically, right?
Right.
In other words, it's more likely for it to take all day if you just allot all day to it. But if you say, no, it's got to be within these 2 hours. Yes, it's important, okay, but it's got to be within these 2 hours, and then all these other things need to happen. And then you can kind of constrain. Now you're more efficient with the time, right? You're efficient with the energy. But if you don't bound things, they tend to just kind of go on, like, you spend all day transcribing that music, right? So kind of related to what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, and part of it's related to, making decisions about when something is done or not. Because, look, this whole perfectionist thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so you don't have to be a perfectionist to value excellence, right? And perfectionist is almost always understood and or communicated as a pejorative. Like it's not like, oh, such and such is a perfectionist. It's like what they're trying to tell you is something that's likely true about their personality and maybe about working with them that might be somewhat challenging, or and or they could be confiding in you or confessing rather a certain character flaw. They have an inability to to end something, to say this is done, now it's time to get to the next task. In my teaching methodology, in particular with I teach saxophone students, with respect to giving them stuff to work on and having several things to work on, it's important for me to communicate a particular tempo for them to master the thing at. Otherwise, what could happen with certain folks is they could just keep practicing the same thing over and over because they have no idea of when they're done. When is this done? When is this task over? You need to know when the task is over, and then you need to be able to move to the next thing. So you don't have to be in the pejorative sense, a perfectionist in order to be a person that values excellence and requires the highest standards out of themselves. But they also, and this is a productivity, we're talking productivity. If you can't stop doing something, if you can't get done doing something because you keep tweaking it, you're not getting anything done.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get off of that.
Interesting. It is interesting to notice the scale, the spectrum, if you will, of perfectionist versus, so you have just a total sloppy person that is not, they're neither doing things nor doing it correctly. Okay. And then on the other end, you have somebody who is high strung, like having a heart attack over the fact that some particular line is a little off. Right. Now,
and neither one of them are getting anything done.
Neither one of them are getting anything done, 100%. And then sometimes when I deal with the type of person who is, getting all agitated about a line, it comes across as though I am the one that doesn't have high standards. Okay, so let's talk from that end. I'm talking about somebody now, they're like, oh, no, this thing has to be perfect. I'm like, dude, it's good enough. Let's send it out. There tends to be how about our standards type stuff. And it's a sacrifice that's going on there, right? Like, in other words, again, we know that time is in that category of things in our serenity period that you don't have control of, okay? And when in these areas, you got to make trade-offs, right? I'm not saying that the standards don't exist. And I'm not saying that I don't hold myself to those standards. I'm saying we got to send this thing. Otherwise, we're not going to get paid and blah, blah, blah. And we're not going to be able to do the other thing and so on. And the fact that we're having this conversation now, maybe it should be a way for us to find out ways to maybe get that line straighter next time in a efficient way that we still ship it out. But we're not going to die on this hill right now. Okay. You have to always be able to raise yourself up to a level of strategist, level of general. This has got to go up. Okay. I have high standards. I'm sacrificing my high standards now, right? You got to be fluid that way, because people get stuck on their high standards. I like people with high standards. Okay. But when you get stuck on it at the expense of actually completing a task, then, as you said, you're actually not getting anything done. And then there's the other end of people where I find myself most times in the other side, where I'm telling people about the line, right? And I'm like, no, it's very, very important, right? That, because anyways, there's something about the right kinds of things that need to be in a product, a finished product, a finished task, right? That is important, that's such that you can then say, okay, this line being askew is not the big thing. And I'm just using a line as an example, right? And that's a skill in of itself that develops with time. You have to know whether you're transcribing music or whether whatever the task may be, whatever the end product may be, you got to know, like, okay, cool. If the client gets this, if the audience receives this, they're going to get about 85% of what they need. They're going to be happy. They're not going to look at you like, oh my God, what kind of crap is this? So, and let's forget about the borders on the paper, okay? The borders are not perfect, but everything else is there, that kind of thing. And sometimes people literally, with what I found, and I didn't quite think for some people, everything is equally important. Like for them, the border is just as important as the letter. And I'm like, eh. So if anything I'm saying here is understand what is really important in the end product, right? And sometimes maybe the color of the paper or the font, maybe you didn't get the perfect font that you wanted that day or the right paper texture, but it's not as important as the information on the paper. If you think they're all the same, then you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard time doing anything.
So this is an interesting thought. So on the grandest scale, it's like, I don't want this to sound too lofty. I think it's part of the reason why the idea of God is important, right? Because it's directional. It implies a particular directional thing, right? And if you consider that progression is always the agenda, right? In everything that you're doing, you're progressing. And so even if something is not perfect, it still represents where you are now, and if you are putting the effort forth, it is improving each time there's a progression, right? It's improving each time that you do it. So that in itself is built into everything that's going on. It's not just about the thing that you're doing, the activity and that you're engaged in, all the way down to whatever the granular details are. It's about how that fits in context and along the sort of pathway of improvement, of pressing on, as the Bible says, pressing on to the, to the high call, press towards the mark, there's an implication about pressing to the mark, towards the mark, is that you're not at the mark. You have to press towards the mark. And yeah, there is this language in the Bible that talks about be perfect as your as your as your God in heaven is perfect. But you understand that sense of perfection there is not the kind of perfection that we're criticizing, right? It's the ever attaining, ever becoming, ever evolving, ever changing, ever growing, ever, so this idea of worship even is, again, it's directional. It gives you something to be focused on, right? Because then that therefore helps you to maybe prioritize certain things so that you're not just considering everything at the same level. Everything is not the same amount of value. It's not.
100%.
There is a hierarchy. You used my word, so I used your word.
You beat me to it. I was going to come in with that, but go ahead.
Right. That was right. That's right. How did you know? How did you know I wanted to say that? So, but yeah. So, and I was talking to TK earlier, TK Coleman, a little bit earlier, and one of the things that we were talking about is just this idea of having standards, having ideals, and why that's so important. But the ideals themselves are not intended to paralyze you. Mm-hmm. They're just there to tell you where you are, and you understand that you have time, as it were, to continue along the path, to keep getting better. I think that's there's the afterlife, and there's, I do want to avoid, hellfire and damnation and brimstone and all that. I would like to avoid that if possible. But there also seems to be other sort of practical purposes of this idea of God as a sort of orienting in establishing certain standards and values, and so then you can say, okay, I'm done with this task because I'm on to this other one, and I'm climbing this mountain, with the rough side of the mountain to see my Lord, as it were.
100%. So one thing about these hierarchies, is that I'm going to say something that Jordan Peterson says, which is that there is a goal in the pyramid.
Not beautiful.
Okay? There is a goal that the pyramid is directed towards, but it's not itself in the pyramid. So it's not a destination. It's like this thing, let's say God, if you will, hovers above all pyramids, all hierarchies, right?
Right.
So that you can't say, oh, I'm reaching for the top stone over there. It's like, no, there is no top stone. There is no destination per se, but we're moving towards that direction. And the thing that is guiding us is outside of the actual pyramid, the hierarchy itself. But it's directing us, right? It's kind of directing us there. And if you think of evolution, right? You look at, let's say, the top of the pyramid will be some organism that exists right now, let's say, right? Let's say a hummingbird, okay? It's there. It's nice, it's beautiful, but it has come through all these changes and adaptations and stuff like that. It's doing this dance. It is never saying, okay, well, you get my, hopefully everybody gets what I'm saying here. Not to overcomplicate things, but there is the idea of things evolving, okay? Things changing, things having to kind of move, but there's a direction that they're moving towards. It's a general direction. It's not an end point. It's not a point where it's like, okay, cool, now here, the hummingbird is perfection. It's like, no, the hummingbird is continuing to move towards perfection because the environment is changing and things are still happening. And maybe it needs to get rid of its wings at some point. I don't know. Go back in the river. I don't know, right? But that is the idea that what the hummingbird is moving towards is outside of, but you said, let's not get too meta. now I did not heed that call, and I went more, continuing that.
You can't help it. It's all right. It's all right.
So use a to-do list. Okay, cool. Use a to-do list. That one makes sense. Obviously, he should have perhaps said this before he talked about the target. What was the thing? Was the main priority, the highlight? Yeah. So the highlight is going to be in your to-do list, and it's the main thing that has to be done, presumably. And we're saying that maybe somewhere else in the list, he's going to talk about the fact that, hey, if you just focus on one thing, it's going to tend to take longer and take more resources than if you actually constrain it, right? Like, I was reading something about Bill Gates and his picture on Time magazines, or his pictures generally speaking, okay? Because, photographers, just like any other type of artist, they have their ways, right? If you've ever done a professional photo shoot in a location where things had to be set up or that kind of stuff, you'll know that they have all, their lighting and the this and the that, and they want to take these several test shots and blah, blah, blah. And if you're Bill Gates and you're here to take a picture for Time magazine, like, cover photo, you don't have time, right, to do what the guy wants, right? So what he does is he comes in and says, I got 7 minutes to take this picture, right? That's what the people tell the photographer before Bill Gates ever gets, that you got 7 minutes. And the photographer is thinking, oh man, I thought I would have like at least an hour and a half. Gotta take a few. It's Bill Gates. It's got to be perfect. Bill Gates like, no, 7 minutes. And every time the picture is good enough. No one has ever looked at any of Bill Gates' pictures in magazines and said, no, I think that, if they really put more time, and this goes to your whole thing about when something is good enough and done, right? Because if you just say, I'm going to keep on and on pressing, okay, towards this perfection, okay, and I fill my whole day with, you can spend a whole day taking that one perfect picture for the Time magazine cover. But Bill Gates says, no, it's going to take 7 minutes. And it takes 7 minutes, and it's done, and it's good enough. Okay? So use a to-do list. Let's see what he has to say about this.
Management is to use a to-do list. And these days I use a physical to-do list with this analog by Ugmonk. It's very nice. It's like you get these like note cards, and then you get this like wooden thing, and you like put the note card in the thing, and it looks like this. And that means like every morning, once I figured out what my daily highlight is, I make a list of the other stuff that I have to do that day, and I shove it on a list, and then I tick them off and cross them off with physical pen as I go throughout my day. It doesn't really matter what system you use for a to-do list, but again, there's a general principle of productivity, which is that our brain is for having ideas, not for holding them. And a big part of why we let stuff slip through the cracks when it comes to managing our time and managing our productivity is because we haven't written them down. And so anytime I need to do something, I write it down into an app. These days I use Roam. But then when I figure out my daily to-do list, it's all based on this analog system by Ugmonk, which is very nice. And it's kind of cool having a physical to-do list in front of me that I can cross things off of, and it just feels nice. And yeah, even at work, when I'm working as a doctor, I use physical to-do lists to manage my patient list, to manage my list of tasks. There's something incredibly satisfying about crossing something off, which you just don't get when you use an app. Principle number
4. So the to-do list, and you mentioned a couple of things here that are kind of interesting with regards to the top our previous videos. He said our brain is for having ideas, not keeping them, right? Which leads us back to David Allen and his stress-free productivity, which says basically take things out of your head so that you have bandwidth for, shall we say, creativity, bandwidth to be able to come up with ideas, as opposed to you keeping a list, a to-do list in your head, put it out into a system, into a calendar, into an appointment, get it out of your head, okay, and put it out into the world and let it start doing the thing that it's supposed to be doing, because your head is not meant to be storing to-do lists. It's supposed to be, presumably, free in order to come up with new things. But what are your thoughts as to this basically to-do list, which is a basic thing, but it obviously relates to the fact that if we do not take stuff out of our head and put it in a to-do list, we're going to have that stress, right? Where we're thinking about what we need to do rather than just have our brain free to do new things. And then we have the calendar let the calendar worry about what needs to happen. Any comments?
Yeah, no, this is something my wife does a lot better than I do. The to-do list thing, like writing down lists. I mean, sometimes I write down lists like when it's like really important. So we've got a jazz. I do a jazz festival every year. The school I work at, and I'm in charge of that, and so there's all kinds of stuff that has to get done. And this year, I was feeling I was starting to get to the point where I was starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed, and then I was like, okay, let me get my list out, and I just started writing stuff down. And there is a satisfying thing that happens when you cross something off.
Mhm.
Now mine is in my iPad, and I've
Mhm.
got a number of lists for different things. But the to-do list thing, that's something that I don't do as well, and that's something that I want to try to improve at. I do a good job, I think, of accommodating the stuff that I need to be able to do, putting it
Mhm.
on a calendar. But when you get all the way down to the most granular components of that, that's when I can start to sort of lose interest
Gotcha.
in that.
For me, I'm similar, and I have to be forced sometimes to get into the granular. And it goes back to the energy thing. Again, now what do I mean by that? I mean that sometimes I don't have the energy to just make the things happen without having to write down, okay, the granular things. I mean, I don't have to, but I find that it's a very efficient use of my time where it's like, okay, cool. Like my brain's a little fuzzy right now as to this task. This task says that I need to compose an email. This task says I need to design this thing. I need to write this letter. I need to write this song, whatever it may be, right? And I know that there's an order to it, but my brain is not firing at 100%. Okay. So, but what my brain can always do, typically, even if I'm not at 100%, is to break down, well, what's the first thing? What's the order? What's the priority? What's the general outline of this letter? What's the general structure of the song that I'm writing? Whatever it may be, what are the things that I need in order to do this design, right? And then I get forced into doing that. And I force myself, because I've learned from the past that when I get to a situation like that where, and again, this is why you got to know yourself, right? Know thyself. I get to a place where I know that the brain is not at 100% right. And rather than just try to alpha my way through this email, I'm going to literally take a piece of paper and be like, write down a few lines about, granularize it a little bit, if you will, right? So obviously there's a macro and micro aspect to all these types of tools. There's the macro to-do list for the day, and then there's the micro granular, well, what's the first, second, third thing in order to do? And if you have all the energy in the world, you'll find that you're just able to just kind of like boom, 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 take things down, break them down step by step in your brain and get it done. But then when energy starts running low, right, or whatever it may be, then maybe you need to kind of like, okay, let me take a step back rather than, so it's not nap time yet, okay? It's not nap time, and I'm not that low yet. Let me go ahead and write this down. And typically after that, then I take the nap, okay? I write this down in step-by-step fashion, and then I take the nap. And by the time I come back and I pick up this list after I've woken up, I'm actually glad I wrote it down, right? Because I'm like, I'm refreshed. I've already thought it through. And here's the trick, right? Beyond the fact that, what I just mentioned, okay? While you're granularizing things, you're going to encounter some problems, right? You're going to be like, in step number 5, I just noticed that I need this thing, and I don't have this thing yet, right? Like let me go and find it in this other folder here, or let me go through this email and make sure that do I actually have this file? Do I have that program? Do I remember that date? That kind of a thing, right? Oh crap, I think I do need to go get this thing from the mailbox or whatever it may be. Just as a result of going through and granularizing things, you're going to encounter certain kinds of problems. Now you can write, okay, cool, this problem, and that smooths the way, going to the efficiency thing again, effectiveness, efficiency, equal productivity. That smooths the path for you, because now you've cast the net ahead of you, and you've seen the problems that could arise, so that you're not just like bumping your head against the wall when you get there. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. You know, I was thinking that I think part of the reason why sometimes, so I'm an intuitive, right? And the whole improvisation and spontaneity thing, my tendency is to create structures that I can improvise within. Right? Now, that's not the same as making a bunch of crap up as I go with no direction and no aim. That's not what I said. Because actually, and shout out to Pastor Joel Brooks, who I just interviewed on Conversations with Dr. Thunder again. It was episode 201. Fascinating conversation. But one thing that he would always say is you have to prepare for spontaneity, right? There is a structure that is implied, and the structure dictates your familiarity with the structure dictates your ability to be truly creative, truly spontaneous, right? If I don't know anything about the fundamentals that govern whatever the structure is, then I'm not going to be effective at being intuitive, right? Being really like spontaneous. And that's a principle that I think a lot of people misunderstand. They don't understand this fully. They think that spontaneity is basically just taking uncalculated risks or just doing stuff that just comes to your head, and just doing whatever spastic, whatever, crazy stuff or whatever, because spontaneity does not require any sort of structure. It's like randomness or something. No, that's not what spontaneity is. I
have
go ahead.
It's kind of like a scientific analogy here, okay? But maybe it's a little too obtuse, too jargony. But basically, there's degrees of freedom to anything. And if you think of just like, let's say, three-dimensional space, there's up, down, left, right, blah, 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 right? And then you have rotations within that as well, right? Now, just knowing that is, for example, analogous to the structure aspect. Knowing where I can go, right? And understanding how I can combine these movements. I can move right and twist and rotate this way. I can do this and do that, okay? Now, the mathematicians, what they do is they have this way of creating this almost infinite degrees of freedom type structures, okay? They're called matrices, right? Where you just have, you can have infinite dimensions of space, infinite dimensions of time, infinite dimensions of any kind of parameter you're trying to measure, right? And they have the ways of relating all these things. It doesn't just have to be blah, blah, blah. And then let's say you're a physicist and you're trying to come up with a concept and you're like, you know what? I think I need 3 dimensions of space, 1 dimension of time, and such. And I want to play with that. You're going to go into the mathematician structure, right? And then you can kind of play, riff with it, and see what kinds of equations come out that you can then go ahead and come up with some kind of hypothesis for it and test, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, but basically the idea is the degrees of freedom, the structure of the matrix, and all this other kinds of things is analogous to your structure stuff. And then within that structure, understanding degrees of freedom, again, you can dance, right? But if you don't know that up exists, right, and you just want to spontaneously figure it out, I don't think you're actually as effective. Now, people tend to think, okay, but I'm constrained by the fact that there is a structure, but no.
No, you're not. You're actually not.
You're not. I don't know.
You're actually liberated. The structure actually exactly. Liberate you. And I did one of my car videos, and BGS calls them car thunder. So there's a playlist on my channel, and the latest one was inspired by a Dennis Sperling video, a recent Dennis Sperling video, where he says that his father told him, the guy that raised him, he used to tell him a man needs to know his own limitations, right? And after years and years, Dennis got to the age where he did some more investigation about that quote, and he discovered that the full quote is actually, a man needs to know his limitations, but a great man has none. Also, I've seen the quote like, a man that knows its own limitations has none. That was another sort of version of the same thing. And of course, Dirty Harry, is famous for saying a man's got to know his own limitations. So, but so here's the thing that's interesting. By understanding the parameters, by knowing the limitations, you actually are facilitating a level of limitlessness. You're removing a limit by understanding the parameters fully, right? So there is that is implied by that statement. To say that a great man has none, that's, you understand, that's a bit of hyperbolic language, but what is actually being said there is not that a great man has no limits, but a great man understands his limits to the extent that he is not limited by them, right? He has reached outside of those limits in a matter of speaking, right?
Mm.
So, yeah. So, and that's the way that I see. That's the way that I see this whole spontaneity thing, right? It's all still the same idea that if you can totally master all aspects of what's inside the structure. One illustration that I used in my in that video, cats can go and check that out when we're done here. But one of the illustrations I used was the Marvel superhero Ant-Man. Okay, now the Ant-Man has a particular kind of, it's technology that facilitates his power. But the suit that he's in is able to shrink him down to a microscopic size. And when you shrink down to a microscopic size, it gives you a different perspective on what it is that's actually there, right? He can also get huge, right? And they did a couple things where they shrunk down a building and then take it over to this other location. Now let's make it, let's make it back to full size again and all that kind of stuff. But in let's see here, it was one of the Infinity War. Was it the Infinity War? I can't remember. It must have been, it could have been Infinity War. I can't remember which one came first, but it's the one that sort of saga concludes. The first movie, Thanos snaps and vaporizes 50% of everybody, and then they find a way to go back and undo it. And the way that they did it, actually they didn't undo it. They went and got the Infinity Stones, and then they snapped, and it made it caused all those people to come back. That's basically what happened. Mm-hmm. what actually facilitated that was that the Ant-Man got shrunk down, and he noticed some things inside. Something was malfunctioning, but he noticed something while he was at a microscopic level. He could see something in a different thing, which facilitated their ability to actually time travel, right? So, and that's what facilitated being able to grab the stones at opportune times, and being able to so anyhow, but my my point was that by seeing something from a different perspective, and in all perspectives, in being shrunk down to see actually how enormous the space that you're talking about, whatever the structure that you're talking about, it in a matter of speaking, if you're small enough, if your perspective is imagining the grandness enough of whatever it is, actually the structure is limitless, right? I mean, it's practically limitless, right? Because your perspective can always can always change. So anyhow,
yeah, when you add the layers of perspective as well, and the layers of scale, that is a different thing. I mean, it adds a definite layer as well. And what Shozan is saying here about a good warrior knows his limitations, and a great warrior finds ways around them. Let me go to another analogical space again, where you can have, if you understand the broader model, let's say you understand mathematics very well, such that you're not just stuck in physics or engineering space, because physics and engineering space are more constrained than the mathematical space, which is almost infinite. Get into that. If you understand that very well, you're going to find that you're able to I'm just saying a very practical thing right now. You're going to be able to know what to ignore in order to just get to what you want. Because here's the analogy. If you don't know this, a lot of times you need to, let's say I have a structure that I want to model or that I have to design. Okay, I have to design this structure for certain kinds of loads. I don't know. It's wind, it's earthquake, it's gravity, it's spinning, who knows, right? Now, if I understand fully the whole global thing, I'm going to know I'm going to know aspects of the model that I can ignore. I can say, hey, I'm going to take down this 3-dimensional thing into 2 dimensions. And not only am I going to take it into 2 dimensions, I'm going to only model half of it, only look at this 2 parts, because I know that when this thing rotates this way into this space and does all the other things, the only important things that are going to happen are X, Y, and Z. And and X is my weakest spot. But if I don't know that stuff, I'm going to need to actually model that whole thing, either by hand or in some computer software, which a lot of people do. They just model the whole thing, put in every load, rotate it every way, and come up with a massive report. But if you understand what's, the grander picture, you're like, no, I already know what's going to happen. I already know the weak points, and I can really just slice things down to a very simple picture where I'm only modeling 2 elements because I know what's behind.
And how did you achieve that the level of knowledge that allows you to use your imagination rather than physically manipulate what did you have to do in order to develop that level of knowledge?
Yeah, it's basically understanding the structure, the broader structure, doing a lot of changing of what you're saying. Also is related to changing of perspective. Being able to zoom out and zoom in is what I'm talking about. Because when you zoom out and you see all the possible things that could happen, and then you zoom in, but basically preparing, studying the big picture, right?
Right. And experimenting, right? So in pressing, doing a lot of different projects that gave you a different angle on. I mean, you're not just making it up. It's not like, it's not like, what, I think that if, maybe this will just work like this. No, that's not how that works.
No. There's a lot of mental experimentation, totally like visualization, in other words, of these structures and these mathematical objects, and you over and over and over again, such that you already kind of know like what's gonna happen, what's free, blah blah blah. So you're not spending all this time trying to do everything, go everywhere. You already know, okay, this is where it's gonna go. This is the important thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think we probably have time for one more of his on his list here, but
Sure.
Let's go.
All based on this analog system by Ugmonk, which is very nice. And it's kind of cool having a physical to-do list in front of me that I can cross things off of, and it just feels nice. And yeah, even at work, when I'm working as a doctor, I use physical to-do lists to manage my patient list, to manage my list of tasks. There's something incredibly satisfying about crossing something off, which you just don't get when you use an app. Principle number 5 for time management is the concept of time blocking. Apparently, this is something that Elon does all the time. And basically, the idea that
I did want to say this thing. And now I'm hearing my son use this word satisfying. We were in relationship to a certain experience, or like he watches these videos and it'll be like of a hot, like a superheated ball that is sat on top of something and it destroys something, or a bar of soap, and they cut it up and then slice into small chunks, and it's described as satisfying. Like what is it, Pimple Popper or whatever, Dr. Pimple Popper.
Oh yeah.
In this description of things being satisfying, and I remember my son was watching something, and he says that is not satisfying. That is like, what are you talking about? That's not satisfying. And I'm thinking to myself, what do you know with your 8-year-old self about what satisfying is anyway? But but I think we have to recognize the difference between actually getting stuff done and using a particular mechanism, right? The mechanism doesn't mean you did anything, right? So you can write stuff down and then you can cross it off, and I suppose that's satisfying, but you also didn't do anything, right? Now it might seem like, and maybe what I'm saying, maybe it just seems like, why did I need to say that? I actually think there are a lot of people that are trapped there. In other words, they buy all the stuff, they do all the stuff that people say. I got my planner, I got my this, I got my that, I got my to-do list. And matter of fact, I got the same one that this guy has. I did all of that, but they're still not getting anything done. It's because it's not the system. That's not the point. I mean, a system can facilitate, but a system is not getting the thing done.
Oh yeah. Reminds me of my video about business structure is overrated. People whom they think that the business is the website and the business cards and shirts with the logo on it.
Right.
They have all kinds of crisp merch and this and that. They got the thing slapped in the room. They got the YouTube channel and all this stuff going, and they think that is the business. I was like, nah, bro. The guy operating out of his garage, right? With no logo, no business card, no nothing, but he's got customers coming to him. That's a business. So what's the difference? In that video, anyways, it was about the customer. That start doing. And this is one of my. I always tell people this, like, it's almost too simple, and that people don't take it seriously. But whenever people start telling me stuff about what they're doing, I always ask them, "Do you have a customer yet?" right? Like, who are you doing it for? Right? Like, who are you doing it for? And the point is, the customer does not have to be a paying customer yet, right? It could be your mom or your niece, whatever it is. If you're stuck somewhere just doing something, chances are you're just doing this structure stuff. You're building the app, you're doing the business, but that's not really what the real world is. The real world is this network of interactions, call it marketplace, okay, where people are going to give you feedback on why the app sucks or why it doesn't suck, which direction you need to go, okay? And in the actual fact of deploying something out to somebody else is going to teach you so much. The business people call it product market fit. But until you get into the market, okay, nothing's going to happen. If you go back to evolution again, this hummingbird is in space, okay? In other words, there's no constraints, no oxygen, no this, no that, no up, no down, no left, no right. How is it going to evolve? Right? What is it? It's not pushing. There's nothing to push against. There's nothing constraining it. Nothing trying to limit it. Nothing compete. There's no. Everything is just. It could go anywhere. I guess it's just going to expand and fill up the whole universe or some crap like that, right? So the marketplace is that ecosystem that is going to give you feedback. The marketplace in this case being custom. So again, it sounds super. You see all the different layers of concept that flow out of it, but it's as simple as go do something for somebody rather than sit down and just work on systems and structures and spreadsheets and nice little papers and the folders that smell nice. You got this new leather bound, whatever, right? So, go ahead.
It reminds me of, I played a lot of pickup basketball. I went out for the team, the JV team. I made the team, and then I decided, okay, I don't want to do it anymore. But I played a lot of pickup basketball up to about mid-20s, and I had crazy hops. I could touch the rim with my elbow, and my strategy was pretty one-dimensional. I was just going to try to dunk the ball on you. Basically, that was the strategy. But anyhow, every once in a while you show up to a game and there would be some dude there and he had all the gear. He had knee pads, he had elbow pads, he had the goggles, he had the mouth, the bite guard. One time I saw a guy show up with one of them face shields to protect the skeletal structure of your face. He had the sweatbands, multiple sweatbands. He showed up and he had ankle weights. He had been walking around with the ankle weights, take them off to start playing, right? And so all of that kind of stuff. But then that cat be sad as a mug. That dude can't, it reminds me also of a scene in The Office, and this is in the first season where they are going to play basketball, and so the first season with Michael Scott, they really made him. He was saying a lot of he said a lot of stuff that would get you canceled, that you easily would have got him fired and would get him canceled, right? So he a lot of stereotypes he was playing to. So Stanley, who's like the only black guy in the office, they're picking their teams, and he picks Stanley because naturally he's a black guy, so he's got to be able to play ball. So they go down in the warehouse, and and it's funny because the Phyllis is like, oh, I'm sorry, Kevin can shoot. Kevin, big Kevin, right? He can shoot. He's shooting the Brock. But Michael didn't think he was going to be able to play, so he didn't pick him. But he picked Stanley, and Stanley's the worst. He can't play at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's there's a scene in I can't even do it right. I mean, he can't even hardly dribble the ball. Let's put it that way. But I say that to say, there's a sort of music example of the same sort of thing, and that is, you go to a jam session, and I went to a jam. I've been to lots of jam sessions, and sometimes guys will show up, and they'll have the suit, they have the look, they have the most expensive instrument, they have like the latest technology. I saw this one dude that had this. There's this contraption. He's a trumpet player, where you put this. It's like this rack thing, like around your neck, and it sort of holds the trumpet. It's posted to your chest. It's sort of holding the trumpet in a certain position. And he had
he's got an exoskeleton, huh?
Oh, he had all this stuff, and plus his horn was a bling horn, right? So bling horn meaning like it had the craziest finish on it, something that was super flashy. And this cat got up to play, and he was sad as a mug. This dude could not play anything. It's much better for you to show up to the joint. You're unassuming. I mean, your sort of dress code is median. You're in the middle, and you go and you pull out a horn, and it plays, but you don't know if that horn's great or not. You come in there and you're about business, and you slaying cats, right? See, that's the real business, because the business is not about what it looks like. It's not about all of the auxiliary stuff, all of the additional stuff. It's not the trinkets. It's not the it's not that you bought the the right horn, and you got this horn and it's this serial number, and you heard that this horn was owned by Coltrane or something. It's not about any of that stuff. None of that stuff matters at all, right? It's it's the time that you spent, and it's what you sound like. And it's just, again, I think it's a big temptation these days, because of sort of materialism, capitalism, which is sort of encouraging people to buy more and more stuff and get more and more things. I think it makes it easier for us to sort of buy into a lot of this foolishness. So anyhow.
I think that we've done 4 or 3 of these. 4 or 5, and we're going to continue next time, right? But yeah. Dr. Thunder, we're going to be doing a show on your channel this Thursday, right? Thunder's Thoughts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so, yeah. I haven't.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I would normally I would have like the thumbnail already or whatever, but I've had as I told you, I was quite consumed transcribing music, so I didn't have as much time as I thought I was going to have to get that done. But anyhow, check it out. We're going to do a show on Thunder's Thoughts. It's going to be all about how introversion is really a superpower. So being an introvert can actually be a superpower. And we're going to kind of reflect back on the pandemic. I've got it'll be somewhat, this episode will be somewhat autobiographical, right, on both of our parts as far as progress made in this time period. And also we are going to be changing Getting Ish Done from Tuesdays to Wednesdays. So are we going to do it starting next week?
Yeah, we're going to do it starting next week. Wednesday time, 6:30 Eastern. Or
6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern. And once a month, we're going to do Getting Ish Done on my channel. But you'll know what it is because, I always, post in my community tab when we're doing it on Ike's channel, and he'll do the same thing when it's on my channel. So it'll be easy to find us. But we're changing to Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's just going to end up being a better time for the show. But yeah, looking forward to Thunder's Thoughts. We always have a pre-show. TikTok Theater. We're always we'll take a look at some recent TikToks and discuss some thoughts about them. I have a pre-show. I've got some new concert footage from a concert that I did this past Saturday, and so I will be clipping that stuff. There's a couple selections in particular that I'm going to clip, and so we'll be playing that for the pre-show. And then, we're going to have a couple videos that will be the sort of primary focus. So if you're an introvert or an extrovert, or however you are, come back and learn something more about the superpower that is introversion.
Indeed. Thursday, okay, and that is also 9:30, correct?
That's right, 9:30 p.m.
9:30 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, Dr. Thunder's channel. And of course, case closed every Sunday. Every Sunday, case closed with the panel. It'll be on my channel this Sunday, so stay tuned for that as well. So we'll be back, okay, next Wednesday to continue this conversation, right?
Yes.
We started out talking about the fact that, hey, you know what? Time is not something that you control. So you're not managing time in that regard. But there are two ways in which we tend to use the word manage. One is you're in control of it. You're in charge of it. The other is you survive it, right? You manage to make it through. You manage to get the degree. You manage to get past 2020, right? Because 2020 was outside of your control, that kind of thing. So time is outside of your control. So typically what people are talking about when they talk about time management is ways of understanding prioritization, ways of understanding effectiveness and efficiency, okay? I started out with the hole stuff. I'm like, hey, do I need to dig a hole right now? Is that the important thing to do? And then if I need to dig a hole, is this a hole that needs to be dug with a spoon or a shovel or a backhoe, right? Or a boring machine, okay? And that'll then lead to, well, who needs to do this kind of a thing? If it's a shovel thing, well, then let me go ahead and delegate it out. If it's a specific type of skill that only I can do because I'm a backhoe type operator, then I got to go do this. Anyways, the point being, effectiveness, efficiency, productivity, prioritization is what this whole thing falls down to. And it is in line with what we've been talking about with regards to putting things down on a list so that it is outside of your head, so that you have the bandwidth for creativity, okay? And such that you're not stressed, okay? And there were many things that we said today, okay, including the whole perfectionist versus non-perfectionist, ever striving towards a goal, a hierarchy, and what hovers above the hierarchy that gives it directionality. All kinds of things were said, both, on the meta level and then on the more pragmatic level. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's been another good episode of Getting Ish Done. And until next time, peace. We're out.
in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.